So this is the Sennheiser Accentum, and for the price of two of these, you can get one of these, the Sennheiser Momentum 4. So which Sennheiser should you get?
Namaste, we're DHRME, difficult headphone reviews made easy.
We'll compare the Accentum with three other headphones of the same price at the end of this video in the addendum. But first, let's resolve the conundrum with the Momentum. Okay, I promise that's the end of it. Starting off with the build quality. The Momentum 4 with its textile covered headband, leather ear cups and stainless steel build gives off a premium vibe. The ear pads, they're like pillows for your ears. In contrast, the Accentum opts for a more plastic approach, which isn't bad, but it's like comparing a luxury pillow to a standard one. Comfortable, but not as plush. The plastic doesn't really creak, so Sennheiser still managed to maintain some sort of quality standard here. The Accentum also has a stronger clamping force. Now, this might just be because it's new and these Momentums have been with us for a while now, but who's to say?
The headband is also more plush on the Momentum. The Accentum's headband padding seems to be made of firmer material and has a bit less give. But in real life use, we didn't really notice the difference. Of course, the whole headband is more oval than round, so that might affect your experience based on your head shape. And while on shape, let's talk size. The Accentum might be a struggle for bigger heads. The maximum size when extended was smaller than all the other headphones in this video. And even though the material is black plastic, it did not hold oils as much as the Sony XM5s did. Let's do an oily boy test.
Not bad. Check out the Oily Boy merch at this link. An interesting thing we've noticed is that somehow headphone manufacturers have concluded buttons cheap, touch control premium, and so it is that the Accentum keeps it old school with buttons, no touch controls here. Ironically, these buttons offer more consistent volume control compared to the Momentum swipe-based touch system. Here's a demonstration.
Sometimes simplicity wins. Apple is the only headphones manufacturer, feels weird to call them that, who seems to have figured this out. Returning to Sennheiser, the Accentum's buttons can do everything. Play, pause, ANC control, volume, and track control. But weirdly enough, they've just skipped an ANC button, so the power button does double duty here. I know they were trying to cut costs, but are buttons that expensive? Every other cheap headphones offer this, and these are things that you will be using every day.
As for call controls, they cater well to the Fuckman with full call control including call, answer, hang up, volume and mute. Yes, mute. Both also feature a side tone slider to adjust how clearly you hear your own voice during calls.
Speaking of the Fuckman,
Pop, pop, popsicle.
Ice, ice, icicle.
Testing.
1, 2, 3.
Not sure about you guys, but in the wind, we like the Sennheiser Momentum 4 and the Sony WHC-H720N better. The Accentum was okay, but the volume of the voice was lower and a bit more muffled. But in the noisy test, the Sony was okay until I started speaking softly. The Momentum 4 does better in that regard, but unfortunately lets in more of the car sounds, which you really hear whooshing by. The Accentum in between the other two. Not as good as the Momentum 4 in voice clarity, but did better when speaking quieter than the Sony. Overall passable for calls in quieter spaces, but not for extended periods outdoors.
the Fuckman will also be satisfied with the multi-point situation here. You can connect to two devices at once. And there's also a nice device list in the Sennheiser Smart Control app that lets you connect and disconnect from there. Overall, nothing to fault there, and yes, there's nothing to choose between these two. We've heard some complaints about multi-point connectivity issues, but in our short time with it, we haven't experienced any of those problems. Stay subscribed to see if there are updates.
Now here's some more superficial and sensory separation. Wow, that's some awesomely accurate alliteration. The Momentum 4 includes a wear sensor to play or pause your music if you wear or remove your headphones. This also works with calls, a nifty feature that the Accentum skips. And when it comes to carrying them around, Momentum throws in a hard shell case while the Accentum comes alone, no soft pouch, nothing. And let's not forget the 3.5mm headphone jack that the Momentum supports.
When we first heard about the Accentum, my initial thought was they're going to skimp on ANC and transparency. Now, the Momentum isn't quite the heavy hitter in this department as its price might suggest. But here's the kicker, the Accentum isn't far behind. As this graph shows, the Accentum lets in a bit more noise across the board. But don't let that fool you. In fact, in real life, the difference is barely noticeable in a side-by-side comparison. For ANC, we rank them both in tier B, with the Momentum being ever so slightly ahead.
When it comes to transparency, the Momentum is at the bottom of the top tier for us at tier S because you actually hear a bit more than you would in real life, as this graph indicates. But again, the Accentum, while being a tier below, in tier A, is more than respectable, and it's at the same level as some much more expensive headphones like the Sony WH-1000 XM5.
Since many of you are interested in the sound aspect, it's important to note that you can't really disable or turn off ANC on either of these Sennheisers, unlike some of the other headphones we will talk about later. Sennheiser's claim of 50 hours on the Accentum is a lie. We tested it and, well, it's pretty accurate. We got about 46 hours with ANC on with the best possible codec it can use. So the story pretty much checks out. At this stage, the only over-ear headphones that have ordinary battery life are the AirPods Max, and even they're like 20 hours, so yeah, over-ear ANC headphones have come a long way. But we have a sneaking suspicion that you want to hear about
the sound. So here goes. In the sound department, the Accentum has no 3.5mm connection as we said earlier, but it does compensate with audio over USB Type-C. And that's also great for charging these cans as well as listening to them at the same time, something the headphone jack can't do.
Courage.
In terms of codecs, aptX HD is on board. The Momentum, however, steps up with aptX Adaptive in addition to an audio cable. Both offer personalized sound and EQ functions, again something we thought that Sennheiser would cut out of the Accentum. The Accentum does, however, use a different sound test method, letting you use your own music, which we kinda prefer. The Momentum sound check feature also takes into account volume to tune the sound further to your liking. Nice. Both of these come with a 5-band EQ, and the result of the volume test is a 5-band EQ preset. Nice execution by Sennheiser, but some of you might find that 5-band EQ a bit too limited, especially since the bands are fixed in place to certain frequencies, unlike another competitor on this list we'll talk about soon.
Out of the box, the Accentum is bass heavy, as this graph shows. Not as bassy as the Bose QC Ultra, but still pretty bassy. There's also a weird dip in the upper mids and lower treble, which looks worse than it sounded, to be honest. But that might be because we're not audiophiles. That treble is a bit of a mess, and that's kind of the story here. Slight changes in placement affected the sound bigly. But after finding our fit and position and some tweaking, the difference in sound quality narrows down significantly. The Momentum 4's bass quality and soundstage are superior. But again, and this surprised us, not by a wide margin. And to be honest, after tweaking and doing all the sound tests, the only thing we missed was the bass quality and the space of the Momentum 4. But again, not by much. I mean, yes, these cannot reach the Momentum 4 in terms of sound, but the difference is much smaller than the Build, for example. Well done, Sennheiser. We'll leave full samples for our members and patrons of the Icicle tier and above. But we're not leaving you hanging. Here's a taste.
Now let's compare the Accentum very quickly to 3 other alternatives in its price range. Number 1, the Sony WH-CH720N, or the 720 as we'll call it. It's significantly cheaper than the Accentum and does surprisingly well on a number of parameters. Also without a case, it performs very similarly in terms of ANC and transparency. Same tier, but the Accentum is slightly better at both. I find the button layout much better on the Sony, and so are the microphones. But 720 doesn't quite have the same punch or sound as good as the Accentum, even though Sony throws its full EQ capabilities at it. On the downside, you can't use the Accentum's name as your password.
The SoundCore Space Q45 is a fantastic alternative to consider as well, with about the same ANC and transparency chops. Comfortable, very good build, buttons, multi-point, a hard shell case. It's got it all. Probably one place where it suffers the most is sound quality. There's something about the SoundCore treble that's just okay. But if you want another one in this range for sound, why don't you consider
the Edifier WH950NB. Somehow these headphones have gone under the radar for the past few months, but we dusted them off, tested them, and man, we were more than happy. I think these are the ones on this list that give the Accentum a run for their money in terms of sound. They have a flatter sound out of the box, but they're very customizable. Not just that, they offer a hard case, multi-point, music, and game modes, and get this, a 4-band parametric EQ in the app. They're not perfect though, so check out the full review we've done on these headphones here.
And if you really think about it, that's the real story here. Sennheiser isn't gunning for the Momentum 4 with the Accentum. It's acknowledging the presence of companies like SoundCore and Edifier who've been killing it at the lower end of the market. And competition, we love it. A friend to consumers and YouTubers alike.
We bought these headphones with our own money, and sometimes we buy them and sometimes we get them. While we do accept contributions from you, our lovely YouTube members and patrons, we do not accept any kind of payments from companies whose products we review. So thank you guys for being our true supporters.
And now a special shout out to our Funkman tier members, Hunter and Paula. Thank you so much.
You've been enjoying our Accentums.
And we've been DHRME. Doei!